James. Okay.
I'll introduce you first of all, if that's all right, Christian.
Okay, perfect. Sorry.
No, not a problem. Welcome, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, depending where you're joining us from. Welcome to our 136th Reading Online Sports Economics Seminar. We have Cristian Sepulveda, who's joining us from Farmingdale State College. I had to find my notes there, and he's going to present on the cost-benefit analysis of an average professional sports team or stadium in the United States. Before Cristian starts, just to reiterate what I said last week, which is I'm filling up slots in this series into the autumn or the fall, depending on your parlance, and there are still slots available mainly in November and December, so November the 3rd, 10th, 24th, and December the 1st, 8th and 15th. So if you've got work you wish to present, you've got PhD students who've got work they want to present, or you know someone else that would be keen to present in this forum, please do get in touch. Particularly keen to hear from you, and especially keen to hear from you if you happen to be a female sports economist or economist that uses sports data. And the other reminder mentioned previously is that October the 19th and 20th will be the first Latin American Sports Economics Conference in Bogota, Colombia. And I believe Jorge Tovar, who's often at these meetings, is still accepting submissions for that. So if you do want to join us in Bogota in October, please do consider submitting for that conference. Okay, Cristian.
Until after the Eastern meetings.
Say again?
Until after the European meetings.
Okay, so it's another couple of weeks.
Yep.
Yeah, great. So you got a couple more weeks to submit. So do give that consideration. Thanks, Dennis. And Dennis and I will be keynote speakers there. So that's something else that is useful information. But yes, Cristian, please do take away your talk. We've discussed you've got an hour and a half to mess around with to present. And as we discussed yesterday, you're happy to take questions. So if folk do want to ask questions, please unmute your mic and interrupt Cristian. He's happy to take questions as he goes along. So Cristian, please do take away your talk.
Okay, thank you very much, James. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here. And thank you to everybody else attending the meeting. Today, I'm going to talk about a very common topic. It's not new at all. I am going to start sharing my screen. Okay. Can you all see the?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the cost and the benefits of building our stadiums, professional stadiums in the United States. This is a very old topic. Is very all sports economists are familiar with the topic, and there is a huge literature talking about this. I think there are some guests in this session that have some papers about it, so the topic is very familiar for them. So I am not thinking I'm going to surprise anybody here too much today. But still, hopefully we can have a nice discussion about it. I am personally not a sports economist. I am more a public finance person. So that's why I chose this perspective. I teach sports economics at Farmingdale State College. So every semester I have at least 2 courses, 2 sections about the topic. And my struggle, or the reason why I ended up writing this paper, is that even though there is a huge literature talking about it, the many topics involved with the topic, with the cost and benefits of building stadiums in the US, are kind of spread out in many different sources. Even the textbooks, the sports economics textbooks available, they talk about this topic in several different sections, in several different chapters. And I try when I teach this topic to my students to get to a clear conclusion. And it's always difficult. It was difficult for me to actually put all the information together. So that was the origin of my interest in writing this paper and studying this topic. So what is the context? The context is, of course, the importance of sports in the US in cultural and economic terms as well. The sports industry is huge. Professional teams move a lot of money, and people really care about sports. In the US, soccer is not as popular as in other countries. However, I have been living here for more than 20 years now, and I could say that people care about American football, about baseball, and to some extent about basketball, and a little less about hockey, as much as people outside the US care about soccer or football. So this topic is very important. I mean, professional sports teams are very, very important. And as a consequence of this, governments usually play a huge role in helping the industry, and they contribute with actually a lot of money. And one way in which they contribute with a lot of money to the professional sports industry is by helping them to build stadiums. Now, the controversy about this point is that professional sports teams and professional leagues in general, they have a lot of money, especially football, baseball, and basketball. Not so much the hockey league, but especially football. And then at a second level, baseball and basketball. They are for-profit companies that, and the owners are extremely rich, and the teams as a business organization, they make a lot of profits every year. So government intervention is justifiable to some extent, but it's kind of weird that they are giving so much money to teams that already have. So the controversy is actually about that. But still, there is some rationale for government intervention. One, you might be familiar with of course, these reasons, is that stadiums are impure public goods. And we know that when we talk about public goods, pure or impure, the private sector does not usually provide the right amount of provision of certain services. In this case, we are talking about the building of stadiums themselves. Now, the government also intervenes in the market by providing subsidies and helping teams to build stadiums, because the teams are supposed to affect the local economic activity. They basically are supposed to bring a lot of economic activity to the local community. So they are supposed to bring economic gains to the local community. So in order to attract the teams to the local community, the governments, the local governments, basically invest money in building the stadiums that are going to end up attracting the teams. So that's the justification. The teams are supposed to bring basically additional expenditure to the local community. Then this increase in economic activity is also expected to create a lot of jobs, and therefore increase the income of the residents of the community. And it's going to have many other different impacts in the local economy. One of them, as there are so many different ways the local economy is going to be impacted, but one of them is that they might affect the housing market, for instance. Now, there are many others. This is just an example in this case. But the idea is that bringing teams to a certain city is going to increase local economic activity and therefore bring benefits to the local residents. That's the justification for that. However, the problem is that in the 2-3 decades that the economists have been studying this topic, we have found a kind of rare, widespread agreement that teams playing in a certain city do not overall really increase economic activity in the city. In other words, the city does not really gain much from hosting sports teams, and therefore is not expected to gain much by spending money on stadiums that are going to attract these teams. Now, the paper was written basically because, in spite of this widespread agreement among economists that the hosting professional teams is not going to really bring gains to the local community, despite that agreement, cities continue to provide very big subsidies to professional sports teams. So basically, we have not been successful in convincing cities, the public, and in general, all the decision makers that are participating in the decision of building new stadiums and basically contributing to the finances of professional sports. We have not been successful in putting there the idea that this is not working, the city is not really gaining. So in that context, the objective of the paper is to provide a very clear outline of the benefits and costs of investing in a stadium that is going to attract a professional team, and also to provide estimates about the economic impact that the teams are going to have in a typical or average, I call it, city hosting a professional team. What is the idea here? And I'm putting this together with something that I said previously. We economists agree that teams are not contributing to the local economy, are not contributing in very positive ways, might not actually be producing damage. We are finding that the net effect of professional teams in local economies in the US is negligible. That's our finding. It's not too good or too bad. However, in this context, we cannot justify big subsidies provided by cities to professional teams. So my idea was to come up with numbers, come up with a very simple framework that can be explained in few pages, hopefully to people that are not necessarily economists. So actually, the level of the concepts and the discussion in the paper in general is not very technical. It's very simple. But the objective is that the paper could be read by non-economists in order to understand how monies and, in general, cost and benefits flow from teams to cities to the national economy, etc., to better understand the problem itself, the problem that the cities are facing when they host a professional team. And then come up with numbers that we can talk about. Because, as I said before, when you read the literature about this topic, you find many papers that are very nicely written and provide very good information about aspects of this problem. But decision makers and local communities don't really have time to read all those papers. In the end, they don't have the knowledge or the time to put all that information together and come up with a well-informed idea about how this works. So that's the context of in which I wrote the paper and the main objective: to simplify the discussion and provide some numbers that are easy to discuss. And the other thing is that as long as the numbers are obtained in a framework that is relatively simple, then it's easy to make adjustments to the numbers and try to and adjust those numbers to different particular situations of specific cities. Okay. So this is just to give you some ideas about the figures we're talking about, the size of the subsidies, and in this case also the cost of the stadiums in the US. All the figures that I'm going to present, the monetary figures are expressed in US dollars of 2022. So basically, I brought all the amounts to December 31st of 2022, and that is true for the rest of the paper. So here you see a summary of all the stadiums built in the US in the four biggest professional leagues in the country. This is Major League Baseball. This is the National Basketball Association. This is the Basketball League. This is the Football League, and this is the Hockey League. These are the four leagues that I'm considering in the paper. All the computations that I'm going to do in the paper are basically done for each of those leagues separately. Okay. This is the number of stadiums. This column is showing the number of stadiums built in the 30 years period of 1991-2020. So you see that all four leagues in the US are building more than 20 stadiums in these 30 years. That is not really surprising. They are considered that the four leagues have around 30 teams. Some leagues have 32. For instance, the Football League has 32 teams. Other leagues have 30, or especially the Hockey League have several teams in Canada that I'm not considering in this paper. Okay, so basically most of the teams in the professional leagues have renovated their stadiums in the last 30 years. And if you add these numbers here, you are going to obtain a number that is greater than 86. The reason why the sum is greater than 86 is that some stadiums built in the considered in this column are being used for several teams. The most common case is that some of the stadiums built for basketball teams are also being used by hockey teams. So there are some duplicates in these two numbers. In particular, there are 8 duplicates in the whole period of time. Okay. So in general, what's important here is that the average public share of construction costs. So basically, the average amount of money that the governments, the city governments mostly, are contributing to the construction of new stadiums is 45.7% in this sample of 36 stadiums. Sorry. Now, technically speaking, I'm always talking about stadiums, but maybe you're familiar with the fact that the baseball stadiums are usually called ballparks. The NBA and the NHL play in what is called arenas, which are basically little stadiums with a roof. But in general, I'm going to be talking about stadiums. I'm going to use that word for everything. So that's a clarification to avoid confusion. Okay, so this is the important percentage. 45.7% of the cost of new stadiums in the last 30 years have been assumed by mostly the city governments. And that basically corresponds to 45.7% of this amount, which is the average cost of the stadium in the same period of time. So per stadium, the governments are contributing with more than $300 million. Now, again, remember that teams are not usually facing financial challenges, very relevant financial challenges. So this is a lot of money that the local community is contributing to businesses that are very profitable, in general, not always, of course. And sorry, something weird happened here. Oh. Sorry, let me. Okay. Now, the other thing that I wanted to say is that this figure here is influenced very significantly by the one stadium built in 2020 with a cost of $5 billion. So if you exclude that particular stadium that didn't have any public subsidy, direct public subsidy, this figure goes up to 50%. So we could say that in general, in the last 30 years, the public the sector has been subsidizing stadiums in approximately, the cost of the stadium in approximately 50% of the costs. This table, this slide is showing something similar, but instead of talking about the whole period of time simultaneously, here we're separating that period of time into decades. So this is the last decade, this is the previous decade, and this is the 90s, the first decade in the whole period of time. What I want you to see here, well, several things. First, the average cost of stadiums in the 90s was less than $400 million. Remember that these are figures brought to 2022 anyway, so they are comparable. In the next decade, the average cost of stadium increased significantly, almost doubled, and then increased significantly again in the last decade. So it more than doubled in the last decade. So the cost of the stadiums in general being built in the US is going up. Basically, they have many more amenities. They are more attractive. They provide more services to the fans, and they have more attractions. And then focusing on the public share of the cost of the stadiums, you can see that as a percentage is going down, because 3 decades ago it was close to 60%. Then the second decade was close to 50%, and then it went down to close to 30-something% in the last decade. Now remember that this is influenced by this stadium that was built in 2020 with a cost of $5 billion, estimated cost of $5 billion, that did not receive any public subsidy. So that's bringing down this number a lot. However, even though the share of public contributions is going down, you see that anyway, in terms of money, the amount of money being spent by the local governments on stadium is actually going up significantly. This is the amount of money contributed by cities to the building of average professional stadiums in the US. In the last decade, the average contribution to the stadiums in the US has been $500 million for each stadium. That's a lot of money. So we're talking about a very significant subsidy providing from the public sector to the sports industry in a context where the sports, professional sports, are for-profit companies. This is something that I don't know how it happens outside the US exactly, but I'm pretty sure that the extent of the subsidies here is very interesting for the foreign observer. I don't know if you have any question at this point. I'm going to continue. If you have any question, please remember that you can interrupt whenever you want. Okay, So I have been implicitly talking about this, but I want to make it
Cristian?
explicit. Yes.
Just say Carl has got his hand up with a question.
Oh, yes. I cannot see that.
It's okay.
It's okay. Hi, Cristian. This is a naive question. So why is it just cultural subsidy in general, or is it a stadium issue? I mean, do local governments overblow the impact of building a museum or an opera house? I mean, I just Googled National Museums Trust in the UK claims that museums contribute gazillion billion to the local economy. It just seems like it's an issue with culture more generally, right? That people feel like they need to justify it with fake numbers, but we want it anyway, whether the fake numbers are true or not.
Right. Yes, I would say so. That the culture is a key component of this dynamic in which the governments are basically making sacrifices and spending public money, are basically spending taxpayers' money. But the taxpayers, to some extent, accept that because of the importance of sports teams um, in the. You can think about the identity of a local community, a sense of pride. There are many things going on that are culturally mostly, and I believe that has a lot to do with this. There are other reasons related with the fact that these are, of course, public goods or impure public goods. But I believe culture is behind it in terms of public acceptance. Because here in the US, actually, in order for a city to pay for a stadium, there are changes in the finances of the city that need to be voted. The voters in that city or in that district or community, they need to accept the changes that are going to bring money for the government to provide the subsidy. So the community explicitly accepts these subsidies. And I believe it has to do with the popularity of sport. I don't think this happens a lot in other industries. In general, if you have a very popular industry and you can raise more money because more people are going to be willing to donate money, or because more people in this case are going to vote favorably for the changes that are going to create the financing.
Okay.
So I would agree with you.
Okay, thanks, Cristian. We can talk about it later, but I only raised it from the perspective of, I think you could educate people and it won't make the damnedest bit of difference, as we've already found, because it doesn't matter to the equation.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, but we can talk about it at the end because it's interesting.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so I already implicitly talked about this, as I said before, but the thing is that one of the ways or in which this problem is framed in the public discussion here in the US is how much money can local governments or should local governments spend in a new stadium in order to attract a new professional team. So how much money can be justified as a subsidy to the professional team? This is a question about the how much money we can justify in terms of the investment we make as a cost of the stadium. But an alternative is how much are we expected to gain from hosting a professional team in the city? Because the idea is that we usually spend the money in building the team in order for the team to accept to be in the city and play in the city. So basically, the point here is that building the stadium or investing in a new stadium is the same thing as deciding to host the professional team in the city. We're talking about two sides of the same analysis. Spending money on the stadium or giving money to the team to build the stadium is part of the same decision, the same cost-benefit analysis than hosting the team in the city. I said this because sometimes people get confused about how to put these things together, and usually putting money on the stadium, in the building of stadium, is a one-time thing, because the stadium is going to be built in 1, 2, maybe 3 years. But hosting the team is something that happens during a long period of time, many years, maybe 10, 20, 30, even more years. But in the end, cost-benefit analysis can actually consider all these benefits and costs together. And in the end, the decision of hosting the team for many years is part of the same decision of spending money on the stadium. So I make sure that this is explained very clearly in the paper, and that's why even the title of the paper talks about a sports team or stadium in the United States. So this is, here in this slide, I'm gonna spend some time describing the framework. After this slide, I'm gonna talk more about numbers, but the numbers, maybe I can go through the numbers relatively quickly, because I believe the contribution of the paper is mostly about the simple framework I am providing. And then the numbers, of course, are going to help to put more concrete information about the size of the different effects going on. First, in the paper, what I do is to discuss the difference between economic impact analysis and cost-benefit analysis. As you might be familiar with already, economic impact analysis are usually based on multipliers. They usually talk about additional spending. They identify sources of additional spending in different areas of the economy, and they apply multipliers to measure the final effect on the local economy of these initial spending changes. There are some problems with this. Basically, there are some changes in economic activity that don't need to be positive, might be negative. And the economic impact analysis is not like this tool cannot be used to address those negative net changes, but is in practice not used for that purpose, or is not used in that way. The other limitation of economic impact analysis is that they don't really measure or care about intangible benefits. When I talk about community pride, for instance, so a sense of belonging that the presence of a team can help the community to develop, those are intangible benefits. We can actually measure in terms of dollars the size of those intangible benefits. And those might be very relevant, but economic impact analysis is not going to really focus on that. The other limitation that of economic impact analysis that is not part of the methodology itself, but it's in reality a common practice. It's a common mispractice. Is that under economic impact analysis, people conducting this analysis make a wrong or misguided use of multipliers. They assume multipliers that are too big or unrealistic and end up producing net benefits that are simply not possible. So economic impact analysis is usually the tool that is being used in the literature. Sometimes it's called the promotional literature, because teams hire companies, consulting companies, to conduct economic impact analysis of how the presence of the team is going to have positive effects on the local economy in order to promote a future move of the team to that city in order to convince taxpayers that they should approve the tax changes, the tax increases that are going to end up producing all the money, collecting all the money that is going to be used to the financing of the stadium that is finally going to attract the team. So in general, in economics, we kind of distrust this analysis conducted with this tool. We usually try to be more careful, and being more careful usually translates into conducting a responsible cost-benefit analysis. Cost-benefit is kind of obvious, but puts more emphasis than economic impact in the costs. Pays more explicit attention to the costs. So in the end, it usually comes up with a more accurate measure of net benefits. And then it can also incorporate intangible benefits and intangible costs. So in general, it's much more complete. So in this paper, what I'm basically doing is to use this analysis to organize all the costs and benefits of a sports stadium and team. So I organized the framework into three perspectives, three mutually exclusive perspectives. One is the perspective of the team, and it's kind of interesting what happens here, because the team in promoting a possible move to another city, the team is usually going to portray itself to the city, to the residents of the city, as bringing a lot of business, as being a very successful business that is going to bring this business to a new city and have what they call ripple effects. But the problem is that the success of the team has nothing to do with the gains of the local community. These are completely different perspectives. So what the team might gain might actually come from a loss from the local community. This is something that can happen. But usually what happens is that teams promote their possible relocations by disregarding this fact, by claiming that the gains from the team, basically the success of filling up a stadium is something that's going to translate to gains to the whole local community, which is not necessarily true. So the local community is a second mutually exclusive perspective, and for completeness, I am adding the national economy. This is not a perspective that anybody is actually defending in practice, but it helps to better understand the flows of gains and losses. So I'm going to divide the analysis into 6 categories. One is the sources of team revenue. Team revenue can be divided into local revenue. Local revenue meaning revenue coming from the local community. And usually what we see here is that revenue coming from the local community is usually, and this is very well known in the literature, we have been talking about this for decades, the money that is spent by local residents in the stadium is actually money that they are not spending. Most of it is money that they are not spending on other businesses in the local economy. So basically, when a team relocates to a city and gets attendees from the local community, those attendees, those fans that are attending the games, are spending the money in the stadium instead of on local restaurants, on movie theaters, on malls, on services, etc. So this is what the literature calls the substitution effect. Is very well documented. What I'm trying to do in this paper is to put a number to the substitution effect and to show how it relates to other effects of the location of teams in cities. So besides that, besides local revenue, we have outside revenue. This is revenue coming from outside the local economy. This is the revenue from visitors. And this is actually a source of money that that can result in gains to the local community because the visitors are going to spend money on other businesses in the local economy. So what is interesting now is to see how the team's revenue is going to be spent. And this is crucial because the team is going to receive a lot of money from different sources. The big problem I'm gonna show, and this is something not surprising for sports economists, I'm pretty well aware of that, is that most of the money that the teams receive in the form of revenue is actually going to leave the local economy for different reasons. Okay, so one of the goals in this paper is, of course, to put numbers to these different flows and to see what is the net effect of inflows and outflows. Okay, so how the team is going to use the revenue received? A big chunk of it is going to be used to pay players and to give basically profits to the owners of the teams. In the US, most of the teams are owned by a single or very few owners. These are private or profit companies owned by mostly single individuals. So when we talk about profits, we're talking about the profits of one or very few persons. Yes? Did I hear something?
I don't think so, Christian.
Okay, sorry about that. So actually, there is one exception. The Green Bay Packers is owned by many people, and this is quite funny. Also, very well known by sports economists in the U.S. Because the Green Bay Packers are owned by many people, actually fans own the Green Bay Packers. They are not typical stocks that can be sold and bought, but thousands of fans own the team. This is, since it's publicly owned, is the only team that is forced legally to publish financial statements. So we have very little information about the finances of teams in the US because they are privately owned and owners choose not to disclose financial information. But we have some very general, very precise information about one particular team in the NFL, the Green Bay Packers, because it's publicly owned. So that's kind of funny, but it talks about how difficult it is to get information, financial information about teams in the US, professional teams in the US. Okay, so most of the money goes to pay players. Actually, I would say that between 45, around 45% of teams' revenue goes to players. And an important part of the rest goes to the owners of teams. And the problem is that most of this money, I'm going to talk about this in detail, most of this money is going to be spent outside the local economy. This is a very well-documented fact. I haven't really seen estimations about how much money goes away of the local economy for this reason, but this is what is called leakage, the economic leakages that have been recognized in the literature for more than 20 years, maybe 30 years, talk about how players and owners spend most of the money they receive outside the local economy. Now, I put here the word gross. This is not done in the literature. I call it gross because this is money that is true, leaving the local economy, but it's not money that is coming from the local economy. Remember that local businesses are contributing to local revenue, and outside businesses are contributing to outside revenue. So the gross leakage in reality is leakage from the total amount of money. So I make a distinction here that to the best of my knowledge, is new in the literature, that what is relevant for the local economy is not the gross leakage, is instead the difference between the amount of money that leaves the local economy and the amount of money that the amount of money that is lost by local businesses and the amount of money that is spent back by mostly players and owners, but also by other people hired by the team. So that difference that I call net leakage is really the source of losses or potentially gains for the local economy. So the difference on what or how much money is lost by other businesses in the local economy and how much money is spent back into that local economy by players, owners, and other people hired by the team or workers of the team. So this is what I believe is critical to understand and to measure in order to see whether the local economy is really going to gain or lose with hosting a new team in the city. There are many other benefits and costs here. I'm mentioning very few, and the truth is that in the paper I am measuring also very few. Why? Because the other benefits and costs are usually so different across different cities that it's very difficult to come up with a standard behavior or standard fact that I could incorporate in these measures of cost benefit. So I separate those other benefits and costs into short-term effects. Here you see in short terms we talk about the effects of games, basically how games affect the local economy. And when games happen, you see visitors coming to the local economy. This is what I mentioned before. Visitors come to the local economy, and of course they spend on the team. They buy tickets, they buy food in the stadium, but they also spend money in the rest of the local economy. They stay in hotels, they go to other restaurants, they buy in malls, they entertainment industry, tourism, etc. So that's a gain for the local economy. As you might suspect at this point, the color green usually represents, in this case, positive changes, so positive contributions to the cost-benefit analysis, and the red or pink represent negative effects or losses. But there are short-term effects. This is just an example. Congestion is something that can be considered as a negative effect of games. There are many others. You can see that some businesses around the stadium might actually lose businesses as a result of the games. Maybe people avoid the area of the stadium during the game. Maybe people don't consume, I don't know, food, drinks in the stadium instead of in those places. So there are many other short-term effects. And here, sorry, I need to. And here you see that there are other substitution effects that we are not really talking about. The gains that the local economy is going to experience from visitors are actually correspond to losses experienced in all communities outside the local area. But nobody talks about that. In reality, it's not part of the cost-benefit analysis that we typically do at the level of the local economy. But this is, as I said before, for completeness. Okay, there are long-term effects. The literature is analyzing so many different topics There are many new businesses that can be created because of the presence of the team. New businesses might be created mostly close to the team, maybe. But the truth is that maybe other businesses are going to be destroyed. So the green color of this box here might turn red in certain situations. I put housing prices in white because many studies show that housing prices not too close to the stadium, maybe too close to the stadium, housing prices might go down a little bit. But in the area close, but not too close to the stadium, maybe housing prices have been seen to go up because of the presence of the stadium and the team. So this can happen, and the literature is very rich in analyzing these effects. There are so many topics about this that I am afraid of start describing them because it's going to take too long. Here, of course, there are also substitution effects. The point is that whenever you bring new businesses, new reasons for people to spend money to a local community, you are taking those new businesses away from other communities. So the substitution effect keeps working in the overall economy, even though we don't see how it happens, or even though we don't care when conducting the cost-benefit analysis for the local economy. And then construction costs are extremely relevant in the short run, mostly. Construction expenditure is almost sure to have a very significant positive effect on the local economy during the time of construction of the stadium. I already showed you the cost of the stadiums. The cost of the stadiums today are higher in the US, higher than $1 billion dollars per stadium. This is money that is being spent in the local area because of the construction. Now, notice that this money is not necessarily going to stay in the local community because this money is going to be spent on construction materials that are being brought by other places. Very likely, the workforce required to build the stadium is going to require people coming from outside the city also. So it's not everything that is going to stay in the local community, but still, the stadiums are so expensive that building them brings a lot of money for that period of time that is usually around 2 years. So that's going to have a short-term effect. Then there are other intangible benefits and costs. Think about local pride. People like having a team in their city. This contributes to the city pride, the city brand. Many people, tourists in the future, might actually be attracted to the city partially because of the marketing that the team is continuously contributing with to the city. But again, completeness. When a team moves to a city and creates some local pride, the team might be moving away from another city and creating a sense of abandonment. So cities that are left by teams are going to, actually this whole cost-benefit analysis conducted at the local level. We can switch the results and the type of analysis we're doing and apply it to the city that is going to be abandoned by the team. Okay, so opposite effects are going to be found in the city that is going to be abandoned by the team. Okay. Now, intangible benefits are relevant, but there is a huge also literature talking about these issues, and they usually find that can be significant, but are systematically most of the studies, not all, but most of the studies conclude that the intangible benefits are not as high as the contributions of the public sector to the building of the stadiums and to the subsidies in general provided to the teams. And the team, sorry, this is something that is not highlighted in the literature, at least I haven't seen it. The city has a brand. When the team thinks about moving to a city, the city itself has a brand that might actually make a positive contribution to the team itself. So it is usually highlighted in the literature how the teams contribute with local pride to the local community. So the teams make a positive, intangible contribution to the local economy. However, what I'm saying here is that, hey, the city might make also a positive contribution to the team's brand. And the team's brand is quite important because the team's brand is what is going to allow the team to charge money for all the things that they sell. So if it's a very popular team that contributes has a very cool brand, then they are going to charge higher prices for all the things that they sell and make more money themselves. So the intangible contributions of the city to the team are also valuable. And one of the most important aspects of this analysis that I honestly haven't seen stressed in the literature is that when we talk about cost-benefit analysis, this is the framework where we are. When we talk about cost-benefit analysis, we are really talking about a discipline that is used to analyze public projects. We usually use cost-benefit analysis to talk about public investments. So when we analyze traditionally intangible benefits and costs in the context of cost-benefit analysis, we are not talking about situations when we can monetize those benefits, intangible benefits created by a project. So, for instance, a government builds a park, and the park is going to have many intangible benefits for the local community. We care about those intangible benefits of that public good. But when we talk about stadiums, and we talk about stadiums being used by professional for-profit teams, the intangible benefits received by public services and by the participation in general of the public sector in building this industry, those intangible benefits enjoyed by the teams are going to be used by the teams to get more revenue. Okay? So this is something that is not usually part of traditional cost-benefit analysis and is not really stressed on the literature, in sports economics literature or in the cost-benefit literature about professional teams. So what, and this is very relevant because we usually don't account for these gains that that the teams get from public contributions. And then another category is effects on employment. This is quite relevant because the teams are going to create some jobs in the community where they are located, but they are also, the local activity, their economic activity is also going to very likely destroy more jobs than what they create. I'm going to explain that briefly in a few minutes. And because of this reason, actually, the reason why they create fewer jobs than what they destroy is because they pay a lot of money to very few people. Consider the number of players receiving, the small number of players receiving several $1 million each, and the owner receiving several $1 million alone. So this is a lot of money concentrated in very few people. And that money is coming from, let me come back, and I'm putting too many lines already, but that money is coming from, it might be coming from local businesses that are paying many low-paid jobs, and low-paid jobs that are going to be lost because the money is being concentrated in very few people. So the idea is that many people might lose their jobs in the local community to concentrate the money into very few. And as a consequence of that, the income inequality is very, very likely going to get worsened in the local economy. And this is something that is sometimes mentioned in the literature, but not, in my opinion, stressed enough. This is almost necessarily going to happen because that's the business of sports, is moving a lot of money into very few people at the expense of others that are receiving much less. And this worsening of income inequalities is, I believe, should be mentioned more and hopefully be measured. Okay, so I'm going to move to some numbers and try to move faster because I already explained the framework, which is what I wanted to do, what I wanted to pay more attention to. I believe the contributions of the paper are already explained there, and the other type of contributions are about numbers. So these numbers that I'm showing you here are coming from Forbes. I remember referees evaluating this paper in some journals, complaining because I'm using data from Forbes. To my knowledge, this is the only data available. They estimate they estimate gate receipts. Gate receipts, other revenue. So they have estimations of total revenue. They also provide estimates of player expenses. This is everything paid to the players, including benefits and bonuses. So everything that goes to the players. And then I computed net expenses because they also give a figure on total expenses, and then operating income. I don't know how it works in the other countries. This is the closest thing you can think of to profit. So operating income, think about operating income as profit. It's not exactly the same, but it's the closest thing. These numbers are going to be important. This is gate revenue. This is the money received by the team in tickets and other services provided in the stadium. But this is the money received by the teams themselves. So if the teams are hiding concession services, still, this is the money that the teams are going to receive. This is the money for the team. So it's tickets plus other stuff. So this is what an average team in the baseball leagues receives in 1 year in 2022. This is the average received by a basketball team, a football team, and a hockey team per year. These are averages. So total revenue, you can see that the numbers are quite higher. Why is that? Is because in the US, you have a lot of money coming not from gate revenue, but from other revenue, and other revenue deals with national money that the league as a whole collects many times or mostly, particularly in the NFL, through national broadcasting rights. And that money is is collected by the league and is given to all the teams in the particular league, following different rules. The rule followed by the NFL, this money is particularly high and is coming from the contract that the NFL signs for national broadcasting rights that gives every single team, I don't remember exactly the amount of money here that comes from national broadcasting rights, but it's most of it. I believe it's more than $400 million for each team. And in particular, the NFL gives every single of the 32 teams in the NFL exactly the same amount of money. Okay? So this is for you to know that. And other expenses, player expenses, this is the amount of money received by the players. So the players are going to decide how much money they are going to spend from this in the local economy or not. Of course, the same is true in basketball, football, and hockey. And this is the amount of money roughly received or estimated to be received by the owners of the teams. They are going to decide how much of that money is going to be spent on the local economy. In particular, this one is particularly low. This is not representative of the long-term profits made in baseball, but in the last years, actually, the profits have been relatively low anyway. Truly affected also by a couple of teams in the league and the effects of the COVID crisis, I believe. But in a long term, this number can be expected to be much higher. Okay, so the economic impact of attendance. Here is where I'm going to talk about the key things that are going to affect the flows of money going out of the local economy and getting into the local economy, and estimate kind of a substitution effect and gross leakage. First, we have the substitution effect. How I estimated the substitution effect of by average teams in the US. Basically, based on Sigrid and Symbolis. They have an actually quite old paper at this point. They talk about other literature accumulated about this issue, and they say that fans from outside the area usually contribute from in between 5–10% of total fans. So basically, I'm using here 15% just to simplify things. So basically, 85% of the fans that you see in a stadium are local residents. That's the assumption that I made, very bold, simplifying assumption, but in line with what the literature has found so far. So, and visitors that represent the 15% by this assumption, 15% of people sitting on the stadiums during games, they spend 36%. This is a figure that I obtained for 2019 from the United States Travel Association. The fans that travel for sport games, they spend 36% of their money in the games and 64% in the rest of the local economy. So these visitors are contributing to the local economy with a certain amount of money. So these are the things that I'm considering in order to obtain average effects of attendance. And then I want to multiply the result by a multiplier. Basically, the rationale here is that a direct effect on spending in the local economy is going to trigger subsequent changes in the local economy during a calendar year. So if I spend money today, let's say a visitor comes with new fresh money, $100, and spends one additional $100 in a restaurant in the local economy, those $100 are going to be received as $100 by the restaurant, are going to be given, part of it is going to pay food, or part of, so companies selling food in the local area, or part is going to be paying waiters and waitresses, or people preparing food and cleaning in the restaurant. And they, with their income, are going to spend the money, very likely spend more money of that income in the local economy within a same year. So that's the rationale for the multiplier effect. So here I have a summary. Yes.
Cristian, I might just suggest that you wrap up the next 5 or 10 minutes to allow some time for discussion at the end.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. And again, James, interruptions, please channel you the interruptions because I cannot see the hands raising. Okay, thank you. Okay, so the gate revenue is the one that we receive. I showed you before in the previous slide for the 4 leagues. The substitution effect, this is basically with a negative sign, which is this is the 85% of this number. Okay, but with a negative sign because it's money that other local businesses are losing. This is the 15% of gate revenue that is being added to the, not the local economy, is added to the revenue of the team only. So this is not a gain for the local economy. is a gain for the team only. What is a gain for the local economy is coming from here, for the 64% spent by visitors in other businesses of the local economy, and that is represented by that amount. Basically, you compare 87% here with 27%, and you obtain this net effect on the local economy. And I multiply that amount by 1.5, and I lead to this net effect on the local economy. So I'm doing several things here that are not very easy to swallow at the first time. The idea is that I'm using the multiplier effect to multiply a negative amount. That usually doesn't happen in economic impact analysis, but I believe it's important to do here because the net effect on the local economy is being negative. And in order to compensate for the money that is leaving the local economy, in the same way that we multiply money that is coming, we need to multiply money that is leaving. So this would be the negative effect on the local economy because of the attendance only. That's the total effect. Now, in order for you to have a perspective, these are relevant numbers. This is $90.5 million. But in the context of a big, not necessarily a big, a medium-sized hosting city, think about a hosting city with an average income per capita and a population of 1.2 million people, average income per capita of $65,000. That's kind of the average in the US, and 1.2 million people, million residents. So you can think about an economy of maybe 80, 90 billion dollars. That's the size of the local economy. So this negative effect on the local economy represents, if I'm doing the math well, 0.1% of the local economy. So it's very small. It's very small. It's negative, but small with respect to the size of the local economy. And the same is true for all the leagues. Now, in the following slides, I'm trying to finish very quickly. I am basically going to explain the key ideas. Basically, also following similar sources in the literature, but of course updating the numbers. We need to consider that most of the money coming, being spent by the team goes to few players and, few players and owners that are subject to the highest tax rate in the US, individual tax rate, which is 35%, 37%. So that means that 63% of their income goes away to the federal government immediately. They are paid this money, 37% of their income goes away to the federal government immediately. Only 63% remain in their hands. And there are also studies talking about how few players actually live in the area where they actually play. I don't know about the owners, but I assume that it's a similar number, maybe smaller. The percentage of players residing in the city where they play is 29% for one specific study talking about basketball players. So think about only 29% of the money really staying in the city. Also assume a marginal propensity to consume of the players or maybe owners of 2/3. Why is relatively small? Because these people are making a lot of money. They don't need to spend so much money. They are also saving a lot, especially the players that know that they are not going to be playing for long. And then you have these players buying a lot of things with their money outside the city. They are financing traveling, they are financing many things. They are buying actually luxury goods that contain a lot of value added from outside the jurisdiction. They are not being produced inside the jurisdiction. So that talks about a big percentage of that money going to things that are actually produced somewhere else. So 50%. If you put all these things together, you get that, and of course the assumptions can be discussed, and the assumptions are going to change a lot from city to city. You see that the players and owners are going to end up spending in the local economy approximately 6% of their income. It could be 10, could be maybe 20, but it could be even less than 6%. This is a number that I expect to change a lot from case to case. Of course, in bigger cities, players and owners are going to end up spending a bigger percentage of their income. At least we can expect that to happen. But the truth is that for these reasons, they're going to spend, or we expect them to spend a very small percentage on the local economy. And we don't have reasons to believe that the owners are going to be quite different. So basically, they're going to end up spending part of their money in the local economy. So the net leakage is going to be smaller to what we computed before, and the multiplying net leakage is going to be smaller to what we computed before, but still negative. Okay, and I'm going to jump over these things and talk very briefly about employment. In terms of employment, the number of players hired by a team, very few. Permanent jobs made by the team, created by the team in the local community, relatively small. Symbalist and Siegfried gave this 70 to 130, so I assume this number to be conservative. And then to estimate the number of people the number of jobs they create by the games, because they hire many people to prepare the stadium and to sell stuff inside for security, many workers. So for that purpose, I compute the average number of games in the season. This is kind of weird, but it's because the NFL is playing right now 17 games per season, and they are taking turns to host the number 9, because they usually host 8 or 9, and they take turns in order to do that from year to year. And this is the number of people that I assume works in the stadium every single game. So assuming that they hire this many people for every single game, but the problem is that they hire these people for only a few hours. I assume 6 hours per game. The number of full-time equivalent part-time jobs that the teams are creating because of the games are given by these numbers that are not that big. So if you put them together, so this number plus this number plus this number, this is the total number of jobs being created by teams. And if you compare that with the number of jobs that they are expected to be lost, but are given in this table. Here, I'm computing the total number of jobs expected to be lost, basically because economic activity is moving away from other local businesses in the area. And low-paid jobs are going to be lost in those businesses. I'm assuming in an average of this income, which is actually very high compared to the type of jobs that is going to be lost. So it's a conservative estimate. These are conservative estimates. So this is are the number of jobs after considering all the benefits and costs. You compare this number of jobs lost with the number of jobs gained, and the numbers are systematically bigger. So this is, of course, having negative effects on the number of jobs in unemployment in the local economy. And then this also talks about the redistribution of income. This is a way to measure or to describe the effects on the distribution of income. So I'm going to finish here. I have other slides, but I want to have time for the discussion. Sorry for taking more than I should have.
Not a problem, Christian. Really interesting talk, thought-provoking. You may not be able to see the chat, but there's a little bit of activity in the chat, in particular about player behavior. We've got a few minutes, so if anyone does want to provide Cristian with any questions or comments, please do raise your hand and we can get cracking with the discussion. Danielle.
Hi, Cristian. Very interesting. You know, a lot of insights and important things that you mentioned in this talk. So I have a, not specifically a question, but a reflection. I am somewhat uncomfortable about the attitude that sometimes economists have, that we know everything and we're always right and we're smarter than everybody else. And in this particular setting, it seems that as you said, now for many years, economists have been saying that the benefits of these building stadiums or trying to bring teams in is not very large, or perhaps even negative, and people keep on doing it. So it could be that despite us being very smart, we're really very bad communicators and not very good at communicating our findings in a way that people understand. But perhaps we should also be consider the fact that first of all, policymakers and politicians, whoever it is that sort of decides on these things, sometimes they have other incentives that are perhaps short-term. And I mean, I think not just in the context of building stadiums, but politicians very often adopt policies that are not that good, but they have a lot of other considerations. And I think in this particular setting, it's particularly difficult because you have what you are very open. You say, look, there are these intangible benefits to the local economy, and the nature of intangible benefits is that they're intangible. And at most, what we can say is like net of all of the intangible benefits, this is the cost-benefit analysis, right? And then the conclusion would be, well, if people go ahead and decide to build these stadiums anyway or try to bring teams in, it must be that the intangible benefits must be at least as large as that thing, if you think that politicians are optimizing, or there are other considerations at play. So I realized this was not really a question. It was really just the very bad habit of economists of making comments rather than questions. But just some thoughts that I don't know, maybe you want to comment on.
I appreciate the comment, and I agree with you. Now, the literature usually measuring the intangible benefits usually finds that are relevant, but not as big as the subsidies provide. So I agree that we need to consider the intangible benefits, but the problem is not so much about subsidizing, but more about subsidizing how much, and whether it's actually necessary to subsidize professional teams that are for-profit companies that are anyway receiving a lot of benefits from society anyway. I mean, for instance, all the players have been training in public institutions since they were kids. They have been, all their training has been subsidized for decades. So the public contributions are there anyway. So the problem, I believe, has to do with the size of the subsidies. That is not justifiable given the circumstances. But I agree that intangible benefits are relevant. And the other thing is that I believe I fully agree that we are bad communicators, but I also believe that there are issues with the discussion itself. The discussion itself tends to be biased. Academic sports economists don't participate in the active discussion so much because they're usually analyzing things that are in the past, while politicians and teams are trying to promote relocations, thinking about what is going to happen in the future. So we are in a disadvantage regarding that, at least in terms of communicating. And the other thing is that the information being discussed also is biased because we don't have a situation in which academics are really participating in the discussion about what is going to happen in the future. Who's paying for the analysis of the future stadium? Who is going to pay for that? Usually it's going to be the government, maybe a decision maker that wants to justify his or her political decision. That could be a government paying for promoting the stadium, or more usually the team itself that is paying a consulting company to make a study that is going to look very positive. So we are usually in a huge disadvantage in the sense that we are not really into the discussion. We are not playing any role there. So my attempt with this paper is to simplify the framework and simplify the numbers. Hey, look at these are the numbers. The numbers are not that big, but these numbers depend on these variables. So if this happens, for instance, if you can make sure that players and owners are going to spend their money locally, then you have a better chance for the team to positively contribute to the local economy. But if that is not going to happen, then you're going to fully rely on the intangible benefits that so far are not justifying the subsidies.
Thanks, Christian. Thanks, Danielle. I guess one thing slightly related that I'll just chip in with Christian is I was kind of struck as you went through this, how the analysis might change if the economic activity involved wasn't sport, was something else. Because obviously local areas try and attract all sorts of businesses to the local area and provide tax breaks and build business parks, industrial parks, and nice road networks and so on. Do you think the same kind of analysis is more broadly applicable? Is there a dramatic difference in the way that sports clubs are treated relative to other types of industries?
I think that's a great question, actually, and what I believe is that the analysis should be similar for businesses, but it's not, because businesses deal with local governments in a more silent way. There are very few relocations of businesses that really reach the news. Very few. And in the meanwhile, you have these private companies receiving public subsidies to relocate without much discussion among the local actors. And I believe that a well-done cost-benefit analysis should be there. And also this consideration that is usually omitted, that is, hey, we're talking about a for-profit company. All the intangibles that the company is creating are relevant, but the company is also receiving benefits that are relevant, benefits from the local community, benefits from that relocation, that the company is by definition going to try to translate into profits. So the relocations are profitable for companies as well. And usually cost-benefit analysis is done in the framework of public projects where the gains are not monetary, right, are intangible. But in the case of these private businesses relocations, this intangible benefit should be done more carefully, because there are aspects of these intangible benefits that can be translated by private companies into profits. So the analysis should change, but I don't see that it's being changed accordingly.
Okay, thanks, Christian. We have reached our time, so we will draw a line there and say thank you very much for the discussion. Thank you for your presentation, Christian. Really interesting, covering a lot of important topics in the economics of sport and a nice approach to looking at them and detailing each different aspect of them. We are back again next week, August the 18th, and we have Stefan Szymanski from the University of Michigan presenting capital scale complementarity and new stadiums. So potentially overlaps with this week's talk, and I look forward to seeing many of you again next week. Thanks very much, everyone. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you, James, a lot.